This is from St. Ephrem the Syrian. Make me whole, Lord, and I will become whole. O only wise and merciful physician, I beseech thy benevolence. Heal the wounds of my soul, that I might understand my place in thy eternal design. St. Ephrem the Syrian, the Syriac tradition, predates the Byzantine, and where the world was seen symbolically, those of you who follow Jonathan Paisios. Make me whole, Lord, and I will become whole. O only wise and merciful physician, I beseech thy benevolence. Heal the wounds of my soul, that I might understand my place in thy eternal design. The healing of the wounds of the soul brings forth a clarity where we understand our place in God's eternal design. So let me put that in modern language. So that I might understand who I am, who God created me to be, and what He put me on this earth to do. This is fundamental for development into strong manhood. You got to know who you are, and you got to know what you should be doing, and then you got to do it. Make that your goal. Set that as your path. The wounds will be healed, and you will find meaning and beauty. You'll find your place in God's eternal design. The world has structure. The entire creation is structured, has structure. Your soul has structure. But this structure is an ontological structure. It's a $35 theological word. It comes from the Greek, ontos, being. We were made to be alive. We were made to live in union with our Creator. The Creator reveals Himself through the creation. We are of dust, but also of the breath of God. And as the wounds heal, as that which has been separated comes together, then the purposes for our existence are revealed to us, and what we are to put our hands to do starts getting done. And in that is the full experience of manhood, communion with God, communion with other men, and work that is productive, meaningful, and enduring. Now, the culture says no, that's not the way it is. And it says it in a lot of different ways, and one of the worst ways, because it holds a lot of men captive, is through porn, is through dissipated sexuality. Man takes his native creative prowess, and what he does, he pours it into the sexual desire and dissipates it away. It heightens the sexual desire to a point where it becomes uncontrollable. Man starts in a whole cycle of masturbation and porn consumption and this and that, and he loses his manhood. He loses his manhood. Why? Because it's in violation of God's eternal design. Remember that the design is ontological. It's not a moralistic system that exists in the sky, kind of like Newtonian physics. That's Protestantism. It has its origin in Catholicism. And its origin fundamentally is a distorted spirituality, and if you want to understand what that distorted spirituality is, read Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisitor, because he saw it 300 years ago. It's playing out now. That's why we have the cultural problems that we do. The cultural problems that we have today stem from the deficiencies of the Catholic revolt against the universal church and then expressed in Protestantism today. That's why mainstream Protestantism is collapsing. It can't address the problems of the culture. The problems of the culture exist in Western Christianity, not Eastern, Western Christianity, because of the insistence of Rome demanding supremacy over the universal church. Those things have cultural ramifications, and those cultural ramifications are in play now. Understand that. That's why we're here. Religion is the ground of culture. If you want to understand that more, read a book, read an essay. It's called Civilization Without Religion, ? By Russell Kirk, who, ironically, is a very good Catholic thinker. He passed away, but he lived here in Michigan. Read that essay, and you begin to see that the cultural struggles, and particularly as they are expressed in the heart of man, amen, okay, amen, because it's the struggles that we all as men face, that's why we're here, have their grounding in a religious dysfunction, all right? But that also means that they will have their healing in the right religion, the right ordering, the right self, right understanding of self. You want to I look at this room, but I see this, I speak a lot these days. I go to different places, and I always see the same thing. I see young men coming into the Orthodox faith. Why is that, everybody's asking? I know the answer to that. It's very simple. It's because they're looking for the grounding of their own manhood, and they're finding it that they intuitively know they're going to find it in orthodoxy. Of course they are. Of course they are, because orthodoxy understands human anthropology in its fullness. Anthropology is another $35 theological word. It comes from anthropos, man in the Greek. It has the fullest and most complete understanding of what a man is, male and female. But our issue here, and it's the first issue, but I see it in all men all across the country, is that we don't know what it is anymore to be a man. But yet the Lord leads us into his Holy Orthodox Church. Most of you have entered into the church through your own soul pain. The soul pain that you experienced is actually a mercy. Why is it a mercy? Because, you know, the era in which a man comes of age, which is 13 to 17, he thinks, because he's finally becoming aware to a world outside his family, the larger world, he thinks that the way he's experiencing it for the first time is the way it's always been. We all think that. This is why boomers, that's my generation, you know. Yeah. Well, we get hit a lot. We get criticized a lot. I always say go a little easier on them. Go a little easier on them. You know, the problem with the boomers is it's a problem that you see almost with every generation, that they can't really step out of the awareness and the era in which they came of age. I saw that with the generation older than mine. I could see in talking to the priests that anyone who came of age before the 60s, before the mid-60s, saw the world in a way completely different than I did. They still had faith in the stability of, the fundamental faith in the fundamental stability of culture. But I'm post-60s. I see the culture as fracturing, and I don't have any confidence that it will maintain itself at all. I'm on the other side of the 60s. So if you're pre-60s, right, you didn't see that. You just didn't see that. You could have seen that if you were to step out of your acquired frame of reference. You could see that. But what I've learned is the older you get, the harder it is to do that. You really have to listen. You really have to listen. And as you're listening, you got to listen to people who are younger than you. And as you're listening, you've got to self-evaluate. and say, oh, is this just a cultural bias I hold, or is the person not seeing it right? Could be either. So the ones who do the criticizing understand you're going to have the same issue when the next generation comes, because it changes every 7 years. Every 7 years. It changes from age 13 to 17. So when you're 25, you're going to realize that the people who are 17 are thinking differently than you are. And this happens every 7-year change. Why 7 years? 13 to 20. Okay? Those are the formative years where self-awareness about the world is acquired. So the boomers who retire in Naples, where I live, there's a lot of them there, who kind of bought into the narrative that okay, if I'm a good corporate soldier, I'm going to end up with a nice retirement home. Well, that's absolutely true. There's a lot of them down there. I've blessed their homes, their condos, and the condos are really nice, man. 20 floors up, overlooking the Gulf. The sun sets in the west. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's close to heaven. It really is. But I also see, too, that once that goal is acquired, the deepest boredom and frustration enter in. One of the biggest problems in Naples with the retired people? Alcoholism. Because what they found out is that they bought into the narrative, they were loyal to the narrative, they achieved what the narrative promised, but it didn't fill the soul. The ones who are spiritually aware, what they do is they start volunteering. They volunteer in the schools, they volunteer in the hospitals, they start giving of themselves and they find themselves. The ones who don't are kind of embittered by the fact that the gates of heaven did not open up at retirement. What they do is they go to dinner parties, cocktail parties. And you have cocktail parties every single day. And there's social strata that builds up. I learned this living there. The social strata, right? And it's a big deal if you get invited to a cocktail party on a higher strata than the one that you're in. So it's like a high school social thing, man, and it develops. It's in the community. It's in all the, we have gated communities there and stuff like that. It's normal. It's not what it sounds like. It's normal. Everything's gated. But that you get an invitation to a social strata that's higher than the one you're in presently, and that's a big deal. And that's also reveals, unfortunately, a paucity of spiritual awareness at the end of a lifetime that actually had a lot of productive work into it, but not the right goal. And you wonder, I ask, was it all worth it? I don't ask them that because they're not ready to hear the question. Why provoke people unnecessarily? There's no point. But I do get the question from them. And I say, you gotta love your brother. You gotta serve your neighbor. You want spiritual health? That's what you've got to do. Now, the advantage you guys have is this. You're young. You're young. You don't have to wait till you're 65 to discover this. I said, for most of you, it's soul pain that brought you into the church. And counted a blessing that soul pain was young. That occurred to you younger because of the assumptions you had when you first came of age, thinking that the way the world is the way it's always been. Well, that's not true. That's not true. If it was, we could not have things such as that beautiful quote from Saint Ephrem the Syrian, who lives in a world in a symbolic world. Symbolos in Greek. Symbolos, where two realities come together. The symbol is the place where those two realities meet. Sim means to bring together. Volos, realities, worlds. Symbolos, all right? And they meet in the symbol. Contrast that with its opposite, And you'll hear something as I say the word in Greek. Diabolos. Hear it? Diabolos. Diabolical. Evil. Diabolos means that which separates. Symbolos brings together. Diabolos tears apart. That's what the devil does. And he does it through the lie. Your father was a liar from the beginning, Jesus says to the Pharisees. And a lot of you guys, because of the pain, you found out you're being fed a lie. You're being fed a lie. The world was not like the marketers told you it was. You guys have been marketed to from the minute you were born. I saw this with my daughter. I didn't realize how diabolical it was until she comes running up to me. Daddy, Daddy, Britney Spears is on the gum machine. I gave her some money to buy some gum. She really wanted it. And she comes back saying, Britney Spears, Britney Spears. She's 5 years old. And the diabolical marketing minds found some way to reach her behind my back. I was so angry about that. So angry. I took her once, we said, oh, let's go. We used to take walks with my little daughter. She loved that. Because whenever we walked, we'd go and buy something, a little treat. Okay? And she goes, Daddy, Daddy, let's take a walk. I said, okay. And taking a walk meant we were going to go to the store and buy a treat. Well, we're in the store. I actually think it was Subway sandwich, right? And they have the TVs there. And I look up and I go, man, because I wanted to protect my daughter from this. That great scene where Madonna and Britney Spears kissed each other. It was all just a marketing thing, but she's sitting there watching it. I saw her. I looked up. What's she looking at? She's looking at the screen. And there's those two kissing, and I saw the confusion on her face. The confusion. Daddy, why are they kissing? Why are they kissing? And I'm thinking it's because the devil's trying to destroy the souls of children. That's why they're kissing. So angry at this, because you want to preserve the innocence of your child, right? She's a little girl, man. It's not time yet to learn about these things. And yet, here, the diabolos, any way, to go in and hurt their souls. Hurt their souls. This is what you came out of. That's why you had the existential pain. But God allowed the existential pain because this is what it caused you to do. You were walking like this. And the pain caused you to look heavenward. Where is meaning? Where is truth? Where is beauty? And the very fact you were searching for that brought into your awareness that you were created for higher things. That your soul thirsted for something that the culture could not offer. And this is universally true. I already know this. I talk to a lot of guys. I talk to hundreds of guys. I love these men. I love these men. And I know what they're really searching for is real human contact. So I'm kind of assertive, I will just go and I will just hug a guy. And I can feel he pulls back. This is kind of a danger. This is kind of a threat. But I also know that connection, that masculine connection, is also the agent of healing. That's what I know. And they trust me enough not to push me away. I actually watch it really close, and I can feel what the reaction is. It's not just arbitrary. I wouldn't do it unless I knew it needed to be done. But once we have that feeling of masculine love, which is one of the most beautiful things in the world, then the healing begins. So we're talking about healing the father wound. I'll tell you what heals the wound. What heals the wound is opening up to the love of another man. I know what this sounds like. I know what it sounds like because I know how we have been programmed. Father, that sounds so gay. I know this. I know that we hold back from this because we have been intimidated by the voices in the dominant culture who demand that we define masculine love in sexual terms. But no, I repudiate that. The world, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more this afternoon too. Love in its fundamental character is masculine, which is to say fatherly and patriarchal. And that's because God is Father. And you as men have a different role to play in the world. You are to become the warriors. You are to become the defenders. You are to become the builders. You are to become the providers because that's what God has ordained. And you are to protect women. Father, that sounds so sexist. Feminism and its opposite, homosexualism, it's an ideology. That's all it is. It's an ideology. It has no ontological, there's that word again, reality. It has no ontological reality. This is why you see men who adopt those ideologies always become effeminate. They lose their masculine character, and they eschew masculine virtue, like courage and self-discipline. It's all about feeling. And if I don't care about someone else's feelings, I at least can care about mine. That's effeminacy. Men build. Men put their own desires aside for the protection of others. Men sacrifice. Heal your wounds, men. Heal them. Let them be healed. So you can actualize this calling to be a man that is in all your souls and in every one of your souls, and that you desire to fulfill. Tell me if that isn't true. Tell me that that doesn't resonate in your souls. I know it does. And the reason I know it does is because that's what you've been made for. That's how we're going to find our place in God's eternal design. Now I'm looking around at the room. I want everybody to look at me because I can see who it is. I can see who it is that longs to experience this, but you're thinking, I can see it on your face. I'm not going to point you guys out who's doing this. There's about 4 of you here are doing this. I want everybody's attention, because some of you are thinking, oh, I wish that was true, and it's for somebody else, but it's not for me. That's a lie of diabolos, the devil. That's a lie. That's a lie. We were all created for this, guys. Every single one of us. We were all created for this, and don't let anyone tell you any different. Now, listen to the next part, because it's really important. The insecurities you feel that I can see it. I know who you are. I can see it. Those insecurities can be healed. They come from your experience. They are not formed in your character. You believe that you're insufficient and deficient, but you're not. You just need healing. That's all you need. And the healing comes through receiving the masculine love of another man. That's where it comes from. So this idea that it's for someone else, but it's not for me, even though I desire it, that's a lie from O Diabolos. And the way he's going to keep you trapped in that lie is if you refuse to enter into communion with your brother. Because it's through the communion with your brother that the healing grace of God flows. God's healing grace is not amorphous. It doesn't flow through the atmosphere like a cloud. God's healing grace happens through the channel of brotherly communion. Brother facing brother, and between them there is an exchange of energy, of meaning, of purpose, of real connection. This grace is exchanged face to face, and the grace itself has structure. It's congruent with the way reality works. It's congruent with the very structure of your soul. And the primary means by which you first experience is through language. I really like you. I tell guys that all the time. I've learned this. I had to come out of kind of the darkness myself to see this. But I can tell when, I got to connect with this guy. I can tell when a guy wants to connect with me. And I'll just say, I like you. I'll just say, let's talk. Sometimes I'll pull a guy aside and I'll say, you need this. I'll give him a hug. Why? Because it's in the communion. It's in the connection that the wounds begin to heal. And I'm telling you, man, we're all wounded. We're all wounded. All right? The world is really screwed up. But that doesn't mean that we have to be screwed up with it. No. We understand what it is, we do our work, and then we turn around and we go and bring that healing to other men. And that is really rewarding. And that's what it means to love your neighbor, to love your brother. I built out this brotherhood. I worked with Gary on it. And I built it out. This sounds audacious, but it really happened. I built it out because God told me to. And the reason he told me to is because I'm one of those guys who's wounded and experienced the healing. I'm not different than you are. And to put it another way, you're no different than I am. We're all in this together, guys. But I was in Greece. I was visiting a monastery with a friend of mine. Walked in one monastery, and the yerand of the monastery came up to me and said in Greek, he said this. He said, you will bring many young men in America into the Orthodox faith, and Elder Paisios, he wasn't a saint yet, Elder Paisios and the Theotokos are going before you. And I said, okay. It went right through me, but I knew it. I said, okay. And I came back and started the St. Paisios Brotherhood. Now, what I've learned in the St. Paisios Brotherhood is that I don't really have to do that much work. I mean, Gary and I work on this a lot, okay? But it grows itself. It grows itself. And I'm beginning to see, just as it grows, this need for brotherhood. And it's through the brotherhood that we find the healing. And at first I was a little tentative about it, honestly, and I thought I had to make the pitch. I came back from I go to Mount Athos every year now because it's kind of like a clarifying time for me. I don't spend much time there, like 5 days. But every time I come back, I get insights, deep insights. And a lot of them have to do with the brotherhood. So I came back last year. I haven't got my insights from this year yet. Got back 3 weeks ago. Kyle and a few others, Matt, some of the guys here went with me. I brought 16 guys with me. But the insight I got 2 years ago was, God can speak to us, but I can't reproduce his voice, but I can say it in mine. Kind of like an apostle, right? It's the word of God through the word of man. It's really what it's kind of like. And it was this: quit apologizing for patriarchy. You're defending patriarchy in terms of its critics. Stop doing that. Forget the critics. This is what it came to me. Forget the critics. Just defend what is true. State what is true, because this truth will always resonate in the soul of the man who's searching for it. So stop apologizing for patriarchy. Stop framing the defense in a way that will appease the critics. The critics are the ones that are deluded, not us. So state it. The love of God is masculine, which is to say it's fatherly, and it's replicated in the creation in the love between men. So when you feel a draw towards a man, you feel the desire to make connection with him, or you sense he wants to make a connection with you, drop the barriers. Drop the barriers and quit thinking that it's gay. That is just cultural propaganda. It's a lie. Pardon my French, it's bullshit. It comes from the depths of hell. Stop it. Because this is what is impeding our communion with one another, and it's that communion that is the source of God's healing in our life, because the communion between men is the channel by which God's healing flows. It's always face to face. Now, I'm a lot more aggressive with this than I used to be. And I can see if someone wants to make a connection with me, I open myself up and I allow it to happen. Sometimes I craft it so it will happen. But the result is always deep friendships, deep, meaningful friendships. And the special joy to me is the healing of the man. Because I know they want to make connection with me, because I know they want to be healed. But they experience that healing. And there's no greater joy than to see your brother healed. So guys, open up to each other. We started this last night. Father Michael's exercise was really a beautiful one. And I've had 5 or 6 guys come up to me and tell me what that experience was. They said just kind of opening up in front of another guy's. And it's uncomfortable, but it's only uncomfortable because it's new. At the same time, it's soul nourishing, and that's what every one of you guys who came up to me and talked about it said. There's something good in the soul. Something good in the soul. Well, I'm telling you that as we continue with that, and we continue talking and doing what we do at retreats like this, you are going to experience that measure of healing. You will experience it. Why? Why? Those of you who watch me in our ASI courses and hear me on when Father Michael does it too, we give our talks on the Brotherhood. You hear me say this: no one desires your healing more than our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. No one does. That's one of the reasons why the Brotherhood is flourishing. We don't market, we don't do anything, yet it keeps growing. Why? Because it's the Lord himself who wants us to understand this and practice it, because it's the Lord himself who wants to see us healed. You, and me. It's really absolutely astonishing. Once you begin to comprehend this, and once you begin to see the love that God has for us. Every day the sun rises. Every day the sun rises. And the sun fills the biosphere with its light and its energy. And the biosphere drinks it in. Every tree drinks in the light and the warmth of the sun, everything living, even our bodies. And the sun shows the great benevolence of God because it rises every single day and it floods the earth with its life, and it's what gives the earth its life. That's God's love towards us. That's his love towards us. And his love is not an effeminate, oh, I feel so good. It's just like a warm shower. It's not that kind of love. It's the kind of love that fills you with masculine life. Okay? You're not lying on the beach drinking in the sun. You're like Hoover Dam that's marshaling that energy for greater good. That's what it's like. The greater good is the strengthening of your brother. That's what we started last night. And the hope is, and it can happen, the hope is that when we leave stronger than when we first began, when we first came. Now tell me, guys, tell me this. Isn't this just the best? Isn't this just what it's about? Isn't it? It is so good. You gotta let this in. You know, the resonance. I know it resonates in your soul because I know what men are created for and I know how they work. I've been doing this a long time. I've learned a lot. All right? Let that resonance, which might just be real light right now, but it's resonance. You like it. Okay? Let it get stronger. Start identifying with it. Put away all the debilitating lies that have held you back. I'm not going to say you're lovable. You are lovable. Okay? But what good is that? I tell my daughter isn't so little anymore. She's 27 years old. But when she was little, she used to crawl up on my lap. And I loved that. It was the best. I remember the last time she did it, she was already like 12 years old. She was getting tall, right? She looked at me, she crawled up on my lap, but it was like holding her like that. It was the very last time. Very last time. Okay, but I still love her and she still loves me. But I'm not going to do that with you, okay? Because we're men. What I'm going to say is, put away the lie. When someone comes to you, another man comes to you, right, and wants to commune with you, wants to get to know you, there's an attraction, there's a draw. You open up your heart. And you let him pour his love into you, and you pour your love into him. Be courageous. Be manly. That's how the healing comes, guys. That's how the healing comes. It comes in contact, in connection with another man. Okay? Now, there's always that little self-censorship thing in me. I know what this sounds like, but I also recognize that that self-censorship thing in me means I'm still kind of bound to the lies of the culture, the dominant lies. People who would dare define for us what manhood really is. It's crazy. Feminists, academics, effete academics. I'm sorry, but that's what's happened. They control the cultural conversation, the cultural narrative. I reject that. I want you to reject it too. But there's always still that little hook. Watch out, because you're going to be attacked for saying this. Yes, I will be attacked for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. All right? Because the truth just needs to be spoken, to be heard. And this is Solzhenitsyn, one of my moral exemplars my whole life. One word of truth outweighs the whole world. And like Solzhenitsyn said, who got it from Dostoevsky, who got it from Holy Scripture, right? That truth first enters the world through a word. It has to be spoken first. So I'm going to speak it anyway, and I hope that you hear it, because it's the Word of God, and he who hears the Word of God and keeps it will be free. All right, that's it, guys. Any questions, discussions? Father Michael, you'll be proud. I've got 3 minutes before 45 minutes are up, so we're okay. All right.
Remarkable, Father, remarkable.
He's speaking to the fact that I quit on time. All right, guys, comments, questions, anything.
Yeah.
And then speak up so I can hear you.
Because he's deaf.
Father, when you said last night, it was one of the gentlemen had mentioned about putting the story or leaving the story behind, and then you touched on that and said it's not only just leaving the story behind, but it's moving forward into the life, the story that God's creating for you.
Yeah.
Everything that you're talking about today, and so much connection with the Word, Christ being that Word, that truth that came into the world.
Mm-hmm.
In the negative self-talk, it's that story that we leave behind that's when we're the author of it, right? So it's already just tainted with that terminal illness that we all suffer. But there's a security in it because we're the author. We know the ending.
Yeah.
Even though we're the villain in that story, even though we're the one that is self-limiting it, or the voices of whoever it is, but we're the ones that echo those voices, right? It might be some other character in that story, but we're the one that continues to put that voice into the story. So that was really powerful when you mentioned that about leaving that behind, but then with faith, moving forward and kind of accepting what's unknown, but trusting that it's going to come from God, right? And letting Him write the story.
Yeah.
Just letting go of that, right? By having the faith to move forward into the
Yeah.
story that He's going to create for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because when it was spoken last night, it really struck me. The story, the false narrative has to actually be rewritten to be the true narrative. Okay, there is truth. Truth exists. And truth is not just a function of narrative, but narrative is the way that we interpret what has happened to us in a way to try and give it meaning, right? And if the narrative is skewed, we're going to be skewed. And the only thing I would say about it is like, it's not so much that we can throw away the narrative, because our life is our life. What has happened. But it's that we see it in truth, in full light. So the narrative a lot of times has to be rewritten. It has to be rewritten. But it has to be rewritten in ways that conform to reality as it really is. And that can be a painful process. But at the same time, even though it's a painful process, it can be an exhilarating and liberating one. That's the thing. And that exhilaration, that liberation can be experienced and felt, and you go forward on that. And you talk to a wise counselor. You don't, that's my 45 minutes are up. You don't ask all of your friends. Okay? You just ask people who can give you sound advice. That's what you do. And you don't spill it out on Facebook. Because if you spill it out on Facebook, you're going to have people who have absolutely no knowledge of anything giving you advice. And why are you laying yourself naked before them? It's just, guys, it's just stupid. But people do it all the time. You know, I cringe sometimes. I'm hardly ever on Facebook, maybe once every 6 months these days. I'm hardly ever on social media anymore. But I see what goes on, I just kind of cringe. But that's what you want to do. And so you talk to a good counselor, and God, through that person, will give you insight. And insight and knowledge are very valuable because you begin to discover who you really are. So thank you for that. Yes?
Yeah, Father, this is awesome and phenomenal. Just a question. There's obviously, as you talked about, our culture is crazy, and like a lot of, there's a big movement among men who don't want to be crazy to sort of flee, go somewhere else. Move to a different society, move to a different culture. That's just not a reality for me, and I imagine other people too. Can you offer any words of hope or encouragement? I have two young boys. One is 6 and one is 10, and I just get terrified a lot about I'm an American. I grew up in PA. I live in Texas now, and I don't like how my own American society is forming my two boys, and the temptation to just move to Russia as it's like, I think there's a priest who fled and moved to Russia, yes. And he's encouraging other people to do that. I don't really want to do that. This is my country.
Yeah.
Do you have any words of hope or encouragement, or because I'm gonna die here. I don't really care. I'm not going anywhere else. But the temptation to just go to Japan or somewhere that's not as crazy is
I know.
high at times. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, Father Joseph Gleason is a friend of mine. Okay, and I can really understand the whole move to Russia thing, but I'm not so sure I would do it. No, I wouldn't do it now, I'm too old, but if I were younger. I'm not so sure if I would do it because I'm kind of a fighter. I would rather punch the guy out, and I would. I don't get into fist fights with people, but I do get into verbal fights with them, and I like to demolish the enemy. I really do. And sometimes I succeed. Okay, but Father Michael.
What was that great line? I came into this world kicking and screaming and covered in somebody else's blood, and if I have to go out the same way.
Yeah. Listen, when it comes to your boys, you're the dominant influence, and I don't mean in a formal way, I mean in an ontological way. You love those boys. They gotta know that Dad loves them. They gotta feel it. You gotta be identified with them, and they have to be identified with you. They've gotta see themselves in you, because you actually come from them. They actually come from you. That's what you gotta do. You're not going to be able to protect them from all the cultural rot. With my daughter, there was no sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I'm real grateful that that did not happen. Okay, and I consider that a huge win. Now, she's not an Amish Orthodox or anything like that. Okay, there's always the ideal, and then there's a reality. You're never going to see her wear a headscarf or anything like that. It's not going to happen. But she hasn't been swallowed up by the culture, and I consider that a great win. I've never was really hard on her. I never made her go to church. Never did anything like that. I understand what happens to priests' kids. It's a brutal thing that can happen to them sometimes, so I always sheltered her from that. Big wall between the home and the church. Never put expectations on her that people were putting on me, as of the church lady types and all that. I just always kind of rejected that. So I think the reason she turned out okay was because she lived under the shelter of the love of my wife and I. And that's what I think you do with your boys. And I think that what you hope for is what every father hopes for, is that your influence will have a lasting effect on him. So even if he strays, he knows where home is. And he knows if he does stray and become a prodigal, that he knows in his heart that the Father will receive him, like the prodigal son. You know, that's the part of the parable that nowadays would be in question. A lot of sons don't have a home that they can go to anymore and don't have a father. But you be that father, and you be that father towards your son, and everything's going to work out in some way or another. Because it's the love that binds. Love covers a multitude of sins, it says in Scripture. And I hear you. The culture it's in a bad way. But I'm going to say something, but I'm not going to get into it because it's going to derail the whole conversation. But I'm going to say one point. I'm not one of these that are convinced the culture's going down the tubes. I'm not Rod Dreher and the Benedict option. He might be right, but I'm not that convinced he is. I think that what we're going through now is a period I call the Great Reveal. That's my name for it. I believe that all the corruption we're seeing has to be revealed, right? Because that's what, you have to expose the demon to rob it of its power. And this came to me when COVID was ending. Well, actually, when it kind of started, but then we figured out that a lot of it was just a lot of misinformation and some part of scam and all that stuff. Don't want to get into it. But I thought, why is this happening, Lord? Why is this happening? I think it's because we've entered an era, it's my name for it, I call the Great Reveal. And I believe that all the corruption has to be revealed. We have to see it. I believe we're going to be given a choice then to walk righteously, and righteously means rightly ordered, to walk in a rightly ordered way, or to embrace the chaos and the sensuality and the sexual anarchy and everything else that's out there. Those two things are at war right now. We're going to have to decide how we're going to live. And that's as a nation, and that's as a culture. So, is this all doomed to hell, and do we all have to run off to the monastery, and become a craftsman or something like that? That's what Rod Dreher thinks. I'm not so sure. We'll see. We'll see who's right. We'll see who's right. So that's what I think about where things are going. I'm not as pessimistic as a lot of people are. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because otherwise we're going to talk about that for the rest of the afternoon. Yes, Father. And then Sean. Sean, you go first. Sean, you go first.
Yeah, so in the church, right, you guys are my brothers, my fathers. I try to open myself to you. I don't always succeed. I'm wondering, Father, if you could give a little advice. There are people in our lives. I have a childhood friend who's essentially still a pagan. I have an academic friend who's a very pious Roman Catholic, which goes up to a certain point and then stops.
Yeah.
I love these men. They're my friends. At the same time, there's always this little distance that I feel because they're not with us yet. I hope they will be someday. And so on the one hand, I guess the dilemma, you don't want to hold back from a guy because of where he is. Like, you're not orthodox, you're not good enough, right? That's not what, but I also, this is my community.
Yeah,
you guys
this is your family.
So,
Yeah.
so how is there any advice on negotiating that tension?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to pass that on in my next talk, but St. John Chrysostom on Brotherhood. I'm going to pass out the essay. This is what St. John Chrysostom says, that among your brothers show affection. Show affection. So our brothers among here, you guys, you gotta hug each other, you gotta kiss each other on the forehead, you gotta show your affection. Okay? It's not enough just to feel it, you gotta show it. But you only do that in the brotherhood. For those outside the brotherhood and men that you love, that you're talking about, you strive to live peaceably with them. All other men, you strive, and he says, as much as you are able to live peaceably with them. That's the division between the two. So you're nourished here in the brotherhood by our communion with one another, and it strengthens us. But you take that strength into the world to live peaceably with other men. That's how it's done. So even if you have an affection for, your Roman Catholic friend, the reality is that can only go so far. It can only go so far. You can't have the same depth and measure of communion that you have with your Orthodox brothers. It just doesn't work. It's ontological, guys, and the body of Christ is real. It's real. It's not just a sociological grouping. It's a communion, a deep fraternity between men is what it is. And so you have to cultivate that here, because if you cultivate that here, your life outside the Brotherhood, you'll be stronger. But you won't be able to cultivate it out there, even if there's some people you really like and feel close to. With them, you live peaceably, and if there's a way you can help them whenever they need help, you help them. That's where it goes. Okay. Yes, Father. Or Deacon. What? Okay.
A comment about moving to Russia. I know a family that moved 2 years ago after the election. Now they are separated, and their kid that was here in America, who had been in 6th grade, he's in 2nd grade there. Because he didn't know the language, didn't know the alphabet. They tested him, he's in 2nd grade.
They moved to Russia?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not ideal, it's not easy.
No.
And you would have to learn the language, get a job, become, and it's a dictatorship, it's not
if somebody came up to me and said, I'm thinking about moving to Russia. I had a family that came to me, and they were going to move to Bermuda. And this was when COVID started, and they were convinced, okay, it's the end of the world, the Antichrist is coming, and all that. I was skeptical. But they came to me and they said, well, we want to move to Bermuda. I said, why do you want to move to Bermuda? There's an Orthodox church there. I said, yeah, I know. But that church is run by one Greek family. You'll never be accepted in there. Right? They were looking to escape the United States. I said, it's just not going to work. I know that church. Right? They're not going to accept you. And then they said, well, we'll start our own church. I said, well, if you start your own church, you're going to be the white man's church. I mean, it's got to be indigenous. If you're going to start Orthodoxy in Bermuda, it's got to be indigenous, right? Otherwise, it's the white man's church. It's not going to happen. So what should we do? And I said, just plant your feet here. Just plant it here. It's a good place to live, right? We got a couple of really good churches. We got kids your age. Plant it here. And they did for a while. Then they picked up and moved again. If you're going to do that, move to Russia, you better count the cost. And if I were talking to somebody that was considering that, I would drill them really hard to make sure that they weren't being driven by idealistic motives. Because I'll tell you, if you're going to move to Russia, I'm not saying you should not. Some people, they found it quite advantageous. But it's a slog, man. It's a slog. It's hard work. And you better not have any romantic delusions about it, because those romantic delusions aren't going to be able to motivate you to complete that journey. Yes?
Rob, I just wanted to add something to this, because we talk about this stuff all the time. And as far as my thought is, we are to be the salt of the earth. We're planted here for a reason. God put us here for a reason. He gave us children we care about. These children, they look for us for guidance. We have to be the examples for our children. My grandparents, who aren't Orthodox, were amazing examples to me of a pious life, a life dedicated to God. It led me to the Orthodox Church. Your children, if they see you living the faith the way you know in your heart you should be living it, if they see you doing that, they will adopt your faith. Because you're like the image of God to them communicate very clearly to them the faith. And so, as fathers, as men, we need to just be doing the work of God that we know in our hearts we need to do. So, like in the Brotherhood, we do the pledge. We do morning prayers. We do evening prayers. Every day we read the holy texts. Every week we go to the services of church. We go to regular confession as our priest dictates for us. We do obey the fast as our priest dictates to do. Because they know better what we need than any of us do. And we do that work, and God shapes us into the kind of salted men that we will be in this country. That if we do that, if we emerge, there's hope for this country. And if we do not, then you probably should be heading to rough road someplace.
Yes.
I have a question, because I do struggle with this in our culture, and you touched on it briefly, but how do we define patriarchy, or how should we define it? Because I struggle with that. I worked in the entertainment industry for most of my life, and the theater world is very much not in agreement with the faith world for the most part.
Yeah.
And I've just always struggled with how do we define patriarchy? Because all I've struggled with, I've just been, as you mentioned, more trying to defend it from their point of view than really even understanding it from my own point of view.
Well, I think the best, especially given what culture is today, I think the answer to that is you live virtuously. Because if you live virtuously, you cultivate the virtues in your own life. You live within patriarchy. Because the virtues flow from God, and God is Father. And the nature of his energy and his love is fatherly, patriarchal. Sean, I know you study this stuff.
The literal Latin meaning of virtue is manliness.
Yeah.
That is what the word means.
Yeah, it means manliness. So, you know, you can fight it kind of on an ideological level. I used to do that all the time. It was kind of fun. But I wasn't gaining ground. I mean, everybody loved what I wrote, but they already agreed with what I said. I wasn't gaining ground, so I kind of quit being a culture warrior. You live it. You live it. We cultivate virtue in our own life. And that's also how we spread the gospel, by the way. But that's how we're healed. That's how we spread the gospel. And keep this in mind, that the volume, the amplitude of the media, which seems all-encompassing, okay, a lot of it's smoke and mirrors. You know, pull yourself back from the media. I used to be a real media freak, but I'm not anymore. I've pulled myself away from that. And I keep my ear much closer to the ground, and I see that most people are looking for what we have found. I tell you, there's a revolution happening in this country, and that revolution is among young men, older men too, like me, but mostly young men, and it's the move towards orthodoxy, and it's happening below the radar. And what is it going to be 20 years from now? And this is what we're part of. This is what we're part of. Forget the people who are screaming the loudest. They're yesterday's news. Be part of what's happening now. No one's going to see it. The media's not going to see it. But when this, I'll make a prediction. When this reaches a critical mass, it's a social movement on one level too, but it reaches a critical mass of all those young men turning back to Christ, and the liberals find out, they're going to freak. And then we get to fight, and we're going to win. In the back.
Yeah, so I'll try to speak up. I think everything you're talking about with men needing connection with other men, like true connection.
Yeah.
You know, brotherhood. It's so poignant and it's so relevant. And you know, I work around a lot of guys. I'm in construction. I pretty much only work around guys. You know, and I see that. You know, I see a lot of times men, especially if you're working one-on-one with another guy. You know, a lot of times you're in teams. So I mean, maybe there's guys here who work in other jobs or you're working with more females. I don't know, but that's not my experience. But I see this desire for a bond. You know what I mean? But there is that like, especially in the trades. You know, you got to be hard. You know what I mean? You have thick skin. You know, and you don't want to appear soft. You know, I kind of just throw that away. You know, I try to kind of get to know guys, like really get to know them. You know, and really form a connection because I know that's what they actually need. You know, a lot of these guys struggle with alcoholism. You know, with abuse.
Yeah,
all this kind of stuff. You know?
I love what you're saying. I love what you're saying. You are hitting it absolutely correctly. Keep talking.
Okay. So, like, and I don't know. As I'm talking more, I guess I'm telling
You love these guys, don't you?
Yeah, I
You
do.
love them, and you want to take care of them, and
Yeah.
you know you've got something to give them, and
Exactly.
you know that some of these guys you're going to pull out of the primordial ooze, and you're going to set their feet on solid ground, right?
Exactly.
I can see it in your heart.
And the thing is, I've been to some of the most like undesirable working circumstances. You know,
Uh-huh.
12-footer to ditch, pouring concrete. But I've had the most heart-to-heart conversations with men I've ever had because we're being open with each other.
You're a leader. Do you know that? You're a leader. Keep talking.
So I guess I was just gonna ask, like, what are some practical ways to be open with other men that probably aren't Christian, let alone Orthodox? Maybe they don't have any actual experience with brotherhood because you know they view it as being a pussy, you know what I mean, or being a bitch, whatever words I hear all day long.
Uh-huh.
But they need this because if not, you know, they're just gonna, you know, they're just gonna go down this road of depravity even more.
They're going to, Father Michael.
Yeah, forgive me, just as you say that, one way of addressing that is what they call it in men's work, you know, an abundance mindset rather than a victim mindset. If you open up and you're honest and you're open and you're vulnerable with other guys, but you're being a whiny bitch about it,
Yeah.
or you're complaining, or I know a lot of the kind of bad mouthing that goes on in social circles. If you open yourself up like that, you're not going to have any effect.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when you're going to get called a pussy or whatever. You need to step up, you need to quit whining, you know,
Yeah.
shoulder your weight on. If you come at it from an abundance mindset where you know you have something positive to
Yeah.
give, that you can pour into somebody else, a word of encouragement. Actually, the work we're going to do
Yeah.
tonight at the Vespers is
Yeah.
going to address this exactly.
Yeah.
Then you can open up in a way that's a little more intimate and honest. And because you're giving to them, you're creating a space where they can respond. You're not
Yeah.
going to them out of neediness.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an easy way to do it.
Yeah, like something I work with this guy. He's for the past like 2 years he's been trying to quit chewing, you know.
Yeah.
And so every single time I see him put a dip in, I'm like, "What are you doing, man? And what is that?" You know, I'm trying to establish that accountability. You know what I mean? And that's just so foreign to a lot of guys, though. You know, like he actually cares what I'm doing. It's like I do because I love him. You know, and so many guys don't know how to receive love. That's what a lot of it is. It isn't,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you don't know actually how to receive love from another man. Probably because they didn't receive it from their father or whatever, or you know what I mean, or they were told they would be a pussy if they did.
Yeah, there is that, and as Father Hans said in his talk also, alas, since the mid-1970s, we've lived in a homoeroticized culture, and it's just perceived as gay. You know, we don't get close to each other, which is why, by the way, gentlemen, the practice exercise that we did last night of grabbing another man from behind.
Yeah.
When was the last time any of us were physically close to another man like that? You know, really, it doesn't happen. So for all of you who have not signed up for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tomorrow so that you can roll around with some other guy on the mat, you know, this is another reason to do that. You know, especially if you've got a little hesitation, you know, about being physically close to another guy, or you're just, you know, just touching somebody else. Something like that gives you a safe way to do that and to help break down some of that resistance. It's been 2 generations now since it's been there. You know? And it's the problem. Father Hans is right. We need to be open, we need to be honest, we need to be intimate with other men, but you do not eroticize it and you do not genitalize it. And that's where most men's thoughts go. When you say, oh man, you're getting too close, it's too gay.
Yeah.
No, it has nothing to do with that. And there's ways of, you know, of presenting ourselves that are just simply above board and honest and platonic and genuinely caring about his welfare.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
So let me say something that's a little touchy. It's going to make everybody a little uncomfortable. But I'm going to say it because I know some guys struggle with it. If those desires are there, right, what's really being expressed, I mean the genitalizing of it, right, or the homoeroticism. Let's say somebody's imagination might go in that direction. Okay, what you really desire, what you're really desiring is real communion with other men. That's what you're desiring. So don't let those thoughts throw you, okay? Just put them aside. But don't let those thoughts lock you out from that intimacy that you desire. You desire it because you need it. Desire is a need, okay? And the desires have to be met, but they have to be met righteously, which is to say within the proper ordering of God's creation. We go back to St. Ephrem the Syrian. They have to be met. Guys, one of the reasons that we have the big problems that we do is because we lock ourselves off to that. And remember what I said, that it's the opening up between the brotherhood. That's the channel of the healing. That's the channel of their healing. We carry our infirmities with us, and we carry them locked up in a prison of our own making. The problem with that is that the infirmities then appear larger than they are. And over time, they don't appear to be healable. Problems appear insurmountable. Problems are solved, the soul is healed when you let your brother help you carry your cross and you carry his. Joseph, stand up. I know this is going to be good.
I don't know your name, but to your point about the culture.
My name is Greg.
Specifically in America, I'm in the military, and what I've noticed is like a lot of guys around me they see through the lie, but there's kind of this overbearing cultural force that like keeps you quiet about it. But sometimes like it kind of peeks out that they see through the lie, and if you like suss that out a little bit, like cautiously at first, people actually will like give a lot more, and then you realize they totally see through the lie. Maybe not from an Orthodox perspective, so it's not like a complete correct worldview, as it were. But then you give them orthodoxy, you introduce them to orthodoxy, you say, hey, all this stuff's crazy, but you don't just stay there and like ruminate on how, you know, degenerate things are. Instead you say like, yeah, this is what's correct, this is what's good, and you like show them that, and you try to bring them to that. And they don't always take to it. Some guys I've found kind of get stuck in like obsessing over how degenerate things are, which runs out of fuel really quick, like it's not very useful, and it kind of becomes an excuse to not do anything. But I find those are kind of easy ins to introduce people to orthodoxy, because then they're like, okay, this is messed up, and here's like the beautiful structure of reality that I've been looking for, but I've only been reacting negatively against the culture so far.
Add to that, Chris, you just said something about that. Out of your personal experience, you'd be very surprised. You would be very surprised how many fellow men are people who, like Father Hans said, it's the smoke and mirrors of the culture. I personally, I had a coworker, he's a African-American Baptist, you know, like that, you know, Southern Baptist kind of person. And, you know, he's my coworker, sits right next to me, and he tells me, you know, oh, my son's coming back, oh, he's they, them now. And he was going along with it because, you know, oh, this is the culture, oh, this is just, you know, he didn't really, you know, he was a little nervous about it, but he didn't want to say anything and, you know, get canceled or whatever it is. I directed him just to a couple of Wikipedia articles about some of that stuff. Immediately, he's in Georgia now, his son's back to eat him, and it's only because, and it's just a little 5-minute intervention, and you'd be very surprised how many people really are underneath the surface there. They don't want to put up with this, just they don't realize that there are other people around them who, you know, all you have to do is speak up and they'll
Yeah.
ready to open up along with you.
Courage, right? Courage.
Yeah, there are the 5,000 out there who have not bowed the knee to Paul.
Yeah.
That we don't know about. Remember that from the life.
Okay, you're next.
Yes, thank you. I'm Dion from Rochester, but I just hear so much here about the importance of community. I hear Father Hans talking about these problems that we have in our hearts are so huge to us and unsolvable, that when we talk about them, and I shared all my pain with everybody here in this room, they weren't so big and they were solvable. And if we have community is so key here. It's so key that we be together. What you said to your coworker, what you shared with your colleagues. Once we crack it open, when we're together in this, that's where we're going to be able to, we can stay here in this country and not move to Russia. We really need to be together. And I you know what John Paisios says, go to church. I mean, and as wonderful it is to do things online, and the St. Paisios Brotherhood is thriving online, and that's a great thing. But until we come together, what Father Michael and Father Hans and Paul have done here to bring this together, it needs to keep going. And so we need to have strong parishes. We need to build, like what Father Hans said, we're builders. We need to build strong parishes. We need to be leaders in our parishes so that we can talk about all this stuff together and be together. And the problem won't seem so big. The culture won't seem so big. And we'll be like those quiet Christians in the Roman Empire that they did all they did was faithful. And they changed the world.
You are the leader of your parishes. I love what you said. You are to be leaders in your parishes. I promise you in the back, and then we'll go to you.
I was just going to say, you are standing up against untruth, that it's a spiritual thing too, like Paul used the word principality or whatever, like there's like, it's this lie that there's also spiritual stuff there, so it helps to pray. And if you pray about it for a while, sometimes God will give you, like, just be with you and things will happen, but it's like not necessarily always an intellectual thing, or like, how can I say this or that, like there is like a lot of, there's a pretty big barrier of like spiritual resistance to doing anything, so if you're discouraged, just keep praying about it, and God will give you courage to talk about it in a loving way. Yeah, that makes sense.
Was there a question there? Did I miss it? No, right?
Just comment.
No. Okay, I promised the man in the back. You. Oh, yeah. Wait, who is next?
Okay, all right. Well, just kind of piggybacking off of what he was saying about being a leader in your community
Yeah.
and a leader in your parish. I was wondering if you could speak at all on, you know, what St. Paul says, the priesthood of all believers,
Uh-huh.
and then especially of men. You know, what is our role day to day, and really kind of being a priest, you know, to those around us. You know what I mean?
Well, in the church or just in general?
In general, yeah.
Okay. I mean, in the church, is to support your priest. I wear two hats. I'm also the spiritual advisor to Antiochian men in my diocese, which under Bishop Sava is going to go national, which means more work, but I'm okay with that. And this is what I say. People always gasp. I can't believe he said that. The strength of the church is the strength of its men. The strength of the men is the strength of the church. One thing that orthodoxy is, it's not a feminized faith. And the way men are constituted, that if the faith goes feminine, which is happening in Protestantism and in Catholicism, because the priesthood is homosexualized there, unfortunately. If an institution goes feminist, it'll become homosexualist. If an institution becomes homosexualist, it'll go feminist. Okay? So what we have here is a cultural rot. Even though the ideology of liberation that justifies it all, institutions that exhibit one of those characteristics will exhibit the other, and it will collapse. Why is that? Because the men check out. Real men check out. Go feminist, the real men check out. Go homosexualist, the real men check out. The problem is that in the culture wars nowadays, that's understood, and so the assault is on real men. That's what it is. The assault is on us, because we buy into neither. We don't buy into the ideology. What do we buy into? We don't buy into anything. Anything. What we do is look for the knowledge on how to live life authentically. There's no room for us in the culture. Doesn't matter. It's still the truth. So what we do is we live the truth. The other stuff is going to fall. It can't sustain itself. You know, it's the last gasp of the medieval synthesis, is what it is. It's the last gasp of ordered Christian culture. Ideology. Ideology is just Christianity inverted. Ideology seeks to build the New Jerusalem by the labor of man rather than waiting for it as a gift from heaven, like Revelations tells us. But I'm telling you, this is going to collapse. It's already collapsing. That's why you have the rise of paganism. We're already here, folks. We're already here. And so this is where the cultural conservatives miss the boat. Okay? Because what has been lost can't be rebuilt. But the reason it can't be rebuilt is because there were cracks in the foundation from the very beginning. They have widened, and now things are going to collapse. It is going to collapse. All right? But at the same time, what's happening? The ancient church is re-emerging. Orthodoxy is gaining a foothold in America. Who would have thought that would ever be possible? When I was in high school, I spent my summers working in a machine shop, and there was one guy, he celebrated Christmas on January 7th, and I thought that was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. Why would you celebrate Christmas on January 7th? Only later did I realize that he was Orthodox. I didn't know what Orthodoxy was, right? It was that foreign. That was that foreign, but no longer. So what do? How do we live? We take the teachings of the church on how men should live. We push aside the ideology. We push it aside. We're not ideologues. We don't see a plan and try and conform ourselves to it. What we do is we look into the heart and we cultivate virtue. Virtue. Why do we do that? Because that's the way that the fathers say we're supposed to live. That's why. We're of the ancient church. The ancient church deals with reality as it is. Orthodoxy is not an ideology. It's not a religious ideology. It's instruction on how to live. And it's all about the cultivation of virtue and becoming stronger men. That's what it is. And in doing that, that is what will transform the culture. So, I take a real long view here. My view is 20, 30 years ahead. So what I'm doing now, and I want you guys to really think about this, what I'm doing now will lead to a much stronger church 20 or 30 years from now. I'm not going to be here 20 or 30 years from now, but you'll be here. And some of you guys, because I know a lot of you, and I know, and I really love a lot of you, and I respect a lot of you because I know your personal battles and what you've gone through to get here, right? But imagine what you're going to be 20 years from now as you assume leadership in the church. I think back, I look at my own life, and I say, oh, this guy's moving a lot faster than I did. Why is that? Because I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a spiritual father. I did not have anyone to teach me what to do, so it had to be all trial and error. It worked, in the long run it worked. I mean, I'm here, right? But it took a whole lot longer than it needed to. But we learn, and we strengthen the present generation. You guys are going to strengthen the next, but that next generation is going to learn even faster than you did. So I take what I say, a long view. What I'm doing now will have its payout 20 years from now. I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. And the church strengthens. So I'll close with this, because what is happening here, and don't let this go to your head, because for to whom much is given, much is required. All right? Well, what's happening here in this room, what's happening at Montanica, what's happening in other places, is something that is so deep and so good that it's going to breathe life and strength into the church long term. The strength of the church is the strength of its men. If men are strong, men seek virtue, men don't become wussified, don't take on the feminist or homosexualist spirit of the age, which is calculated only to rob you of your masculine self-confidence and make you weak. If you don't do that, but you seek virtue instead, then it's good. I'll conclude with this. Here's my outlook. I used to be a culture warrior. I'm not a culture warrior anymore. What I'm doing, and I'm doing this like 10 years early, 20 years early. That's okay, do it with me. We're laying the foundation for the rebuilding of culture after the corrupt portions collapse. That's what we're doing here, okay? And if you walk in virtue, and you become strong, God will protect you, and you will be one of the leaders leading the lost out of the darkness. That's what this is. It's nothing less than that. So God bless you all.